Hello, lovely people. So I do realize that on my channel, it's been quite a while since we had an RTA video. So let's do one. And this RTA evaluation is going to be of James's car, James's Merc. If you haven't seen it, watch a couple of videos before when I posted a video about SQL system. So James has a few quite interesting solutions in his car, and we're not going to go through the whole thing. What I want to show you, because it is a competing car, so I don't want to show you like everything. I'm going to show you just the raw responses and all the EQ work that I did with it. And after that, James kind of did the final adjustments by ear. And after that, I didn't take any measurements because it's all his. He's competing with that car, so I don't want to give up too many things. But I think it's very interesting to see how some of the drivers perform because he has, as I mentioned, quite a few interesting solutions. So let's start with the tweeters. What he has in his sills, if you saw, it's Dayton, as he says, knock off AMT drivers. So those we know they don't play low at all. And here you can see they are crossed at, I do believe it's 4K or 5K. I did try to cross them lower, but there's no difference and no response. So basically they do not play any lower than that at all. From this we see that the response is not as smooth. Now I'm not sure if it's due to the location of the driver where you have the side window very close to it, or it's the actual driver itself, because I didn't take the near field response. But we do have some jaggedness and we have a peak at about 10K. So that's the right side, and this is the left one, which with the same electrical crossover, we have slightly different acoustical crossover, slightly different drop off. And again, this is just location and aiming. So this is, the left one is slightly nicer, just one little peak, which is interesting. It might be a reflection because it is on both of these tweeters. Not sure about that. You see the drop off starts at like 15K and 16 and a half, there's nothing. It's just because James plays everything via Bluetooth, a head unit. So above 16, 17K, there's no response just because the Bluetooth doesn't go that far. So these are the tweeters. Let's see what we did with it. So left one, very simple. So I did reduce the level later on just to level match them. But for this, is just literally just remove this peak and a little bit of energy here between 6 and 8K. So that's the left one. On the right one is very similar. From this, we got this, just to remove these peaks and all of this energy just to match them. And after EQ, left and right, they match perfectly. And it does correspond to acoustical crossover of, I do believe, 5.5 or 6K, something like that. So when they sum a bit higher, but the response is very nice after that. Now let's have a look at the mid-ranges. So mid-ranges are in custom A-pillars, and the actual mid-ranges themselves are built by James. So he built those speakers. And those are 4-inch mid-ranges. However, you can see they're kind of wideband because they play all the way up. Now from this we can see that they do indeed play low, down to like 130 or whatever. I'm not sure about the FS of that driver, but it is quite low since it's a 4-inch, so they do play low. We do have this little hump at about 200, which is, especially on the left one, which is an indication of you have mid-ranges in pods act very similarly. So I'm not sure how much airspace James has behind those drivers, but to me it indicates that the airflow might be slightly restricted because of this peak. Maybe, I'm not sure. I'm just literally just speculating, but the right one looks fine. However, from this we see that the response between left and right is not that similar. And it might be due to the fact that they're in A pillars and not in the dash, because when you have speakers in the dash, the response is much more similar left to right, but in his case, it's not. They do play, as I mentioned, all the way up, so there's no problem integrating them with the tweeters, like here. So the top end crossover was defined by the actual tweeters because they cannot play low. And then to define the bottom end, I had to look at the mid-bass driver. So we're going to have a look at the mid-bass as well later on. But we determined a crossover of, I believe, 180. Where is the mid? 180 and 6K, something like that. So from this we see we just need to remove this massive peak here and a little bit of smoothing out of the response for the left, and for the right is very, very similar. So we could choose for the right one a higher target curve. So I did choose a higher target curve, so we didn't lose that much energy. But the response in general of the mid-ranges is good. It's not bad. They do sound very smooth even without EQ. They sound very nice. One thing that I want to show you is the actual EQ work. With EQ, he has a JL 686 or whatever it's called. So it's a JL DSP. And in REW, tweak 88, yeah. So in REW, you can choose what DSP you want to use. So we chose JL tweak 88, and this DSP, because it has only 10 bands of parametric EQ, so you're kind of limited in that. So when you choose this DSP, you have 10 available bands. However, if you choose like Audio-Tech Fish or something else, it's going to give you 30 bands. So whenever you're trying to EQ, select the correct DSP in REW so that you would have the correct gain values, Q values, and the correct amount of EQ bands according to your DSP. So this is how we did it, because you need to remember that this is only 10 bands. So left mid-range, we crossed it, something like that. I don't actually remember 13. Let's have a look at the crossovers. Crossovers were 180 and 5.7. So something similar on both left and right. So they crossed at 180. 180 for 4-inch drivers is perfectly fine, especially when you remove all this hunk from here. So after this, and then EQ for left side, just like that. So you can see a little bit boost here, cut here, but very little EQ needed. 10 bands were perfectly fine enough, and I just removed this energy here from the bottom mid-range. So this is the left mid-range. Right was kind of similar. After EQ, again, just remove the top end, the bottom, and with EQ, this. So this is level reduced as well, because I do believe I chose a much higher target curve and boosted this region a little bit, because you can see there's literally no EQ in this area and there's very little EQ in this. So just little boost here and just cut here. Actually, we can have a look. Number 17, EQ. Yeah, there's very little adjustment. A little bit here, nothing here. In the middle, yeah. And after that, we ended up left and right matching very, very nice. Very, very cool. So the good thing about pillars is that you don't have the windshield reflection between, well, 1 and 2K somewhere there. So it doesn't exist. However, when you saw with the raw responses, the left and right is not equal. But after EQ, it's totally equal. So the most interesting part is probably going to be the mid-bass in the doors. So as a reminder, he has 4 6.5-inch mid-bass drivers in each door in sealed enclosures. And whenever I saw this, at first I was expecting to have a massive boost between like 100 and 200 hertz and no low end and nothing else, but surprisingly good. So we have a very nice response from 40 all the way up to 200. So this is the left side, and we do have this boost, which like here they do play all the way flat, which I imagine would be just due to the cabin gain. And no cancellations, no nothing. So surprising is that when you have multiple drivers next to each other, you would expect it to have some kind of comb filtering effect or something. However, since the frequencies that are playing are very low, the wavelengths are very long as well, and hence you don't have any comb filtering and you have a very nice response and left and the right side. So the right side is not as peaky, and you have from 40 all the way up to close to 400 with this little dip at 160, which is the cabin cancellation. So even if you have multiple mid-bass drivers, even if you have a super rigid MDF enclosure and everything, it's still physics, and you still have a cancellation due to cabin dimensions, and you cannot do anything about it. So let's have a look. Left mid-bass, after the crossover, when there's something like this, I do believe I crossed them at 60 or something, I don't really remember. And to chop off the top end, and after the EQ, we ended up with this. So I had to pull the level down quite a lot. However, in doing so, I didn't lose much level with EQ. And I'm gonna put it like this. So you can see the EQ work. I just has to pull down above 100 just to remove this hump. So the drivers play very, very nice and very little EQ is needed. That's the left one. The right one, let me pull this down. That's my target. After the crossovers, again, we're not losing level at all, just this. And you could leave this as it is with no EQ, and it would be very nice. However, we still have four drivers. We have loads of energy. Since they were pulled down quite a lot by like 10, 15 dB down from the normal level, they don't rattle. So I could boost this cancellation as well, and it did react to boosting, so why not? So just remove this little bit and boost this little bit, and we ended up with something like this. So left and right, they match close to ideal. Very, very nice. And you would expect you're gonna have loads of problems with multiple drivers. However, it's not the case at all. So the mid bases, surprising, they play very, very nice. Now the front subwoofer. So for the front subwoofer, what he has a ported enclosure. I think he said it's an 8-inch with a port. And when he built that enclosure, he said he didn't really model it, and he just tried to fit the enclosure and the port in the enclosure. And I do believe that he ended up with a tuning frequency of, if you were gonna look at this, it's like maybe 70 hertz or something, because he did mention that 70 hertz in his car literally hurts because there's so much level. However, this is the thing that to me in his car sounded quite bad. I mean, the port, I don't know if it's chuffing or it's the actual port noise or something, but this range of the frequency doesn't sound that nice. So we cross this. Let's have a look. Front subwoofer 30 to 80. So I had to reduce the bottom end and the top end much more. After the crossover, when does something like this. So since the crossovers are quite close to each other, that's why you have the reduction in level a little bit, because they kind of overlap the crossovers. Let me bring this target a little bit up for you to better to see. Something like this. And even with this, you can see that we're not losing a lot of level, just a little hump here and a little hump here. So he said when he tunes for like SPL proper, he doesn't do anything with these because obviously he needs the level. But after the EQ, ended up something like this, just remove this level. And I did try toggle on and off this EQ band that manages this, and the sound improves massively, drastically when you have this EQ applied. When you have all of this energy coming from the port, it doesn't sound as nice. And after everything, we had to pull the front sub a little bit down because obviously it's too much in level. Now with the rear subwoofer, the one that he has in trunk baffle, kind of IB. Now, James did mention that that subwoofer doesn't like to play low at all. So this, I believe it was a 40 hertz crossover. And since we crossed the front subwoofer at 30, you can see here, I had to match it with the rear. So we did match it, applying a 30 hertz electrical crossover. And the response, to be honest, obviously I had to pull the level down, but the response itself with no EQ is perfect. It matches the target, almost ideal. So this is the target of a subwoofer cross at 30 hertz, and you can see it matches ideally. Now we do have extension down to 20 hertz, and that subwoofer, since it's kind of an SPL subwoofer, it doesn't play below that. It doesn't play below FS like at all. With FI subwoofer, with the One Audio or Acoustic Elegance, you can see that they do carry on all the way down to like 12, 13, or even 10 hertz. But this one, down to 20, it falls off. But to be honest, it's perfectly enough because there's very little content below 20, even below 20 and 30 hertz. There's very, very little content there. So subwoofer was literally not EQ'd at all. And if I'm gonna apply everything just for you to show, we ended up with something like this. Now, obviously, all of everything like below 200, the mid bass, the front sub and rear sub had to be pulled down because this was kind of my target as I imagined. However, James, after everything, he did had to increase the level for everything, because first comment that I got from him when he came back home is, "Where's my base? You took away my base." Now, yeah, obviously, when you're in SQL, when you're kind of a little bit of a base head, you need that level. So he did pull it up afterwards. But yeah, I'm not going to show you the summing. I can show you the summing, but it's not really important because he did change the levels. He did play a little bit with EQ and stuff, but this is basically the EQ portion of the work that I did in his car, and everything else was done by him. And with this tune, last Saturday, he was in the competition and he gained, I do believe, like 11 points compared to the last round just by changing the actual tune. I don't believe he changed any of the gear that he had. And that's pretty much it. What I would like to hear from you is if you have any very unconventional solutions in your systems, in your cars, please pop them in the comment below. If you have, I don't know, ported Midbase or something, it'll be very interesting to hear from you. And thank you very much for watching, guys. I will see you in the next one.